The Cuphead Show is getting a new season very soon, sometime this year, likely this summer from what we've heard. This led us to rewatch season 1 so we could discuss the myriad of relationships throughout the show.
It works on account of our brotherly love.
Now, for this video, we'll be discussing all kinds of relationships and not just the romantic ones. So, which of these relationships are healthy and which of them are heavily toxic? I'm Caleb with Wicked Binge, and this is the Cuphead Show, Relationships Healthy to Toxic. Small spoiler warning as we'll be going over some of the major plot beats. Go watch the first season on Netflix and then come back to this list. With our obligatory spoiler warning out of the way, we can now move into the first of our sections, the healthy relationships. Earning our gold medal of healthiness is that of Cuphead and Mugman. Cuphead and Mugman are brothers and lifelong friends since they seem pretty close in age, maybe even being twins. The two are shown to respect each other quite enough and will always stand up for each other.
Relax, we'll handle it.
They share meals when needed, Mugman makes a life-saving sweater for his brother, and while the two bicker, it's nothing out of the ordinary for brothers. Cuphead and Mugman's relationship is a focal point of the show, and it makes them all the better at the end of the day. The silver medal of healthiness belongs to Cuphead, Mugman, and Miss Chalice. The three of them are considered fast friends at best and partners in crime at worst.
I suppose we do love trouble.
As Chalice teaches the boys about how to effectively utilize charm to get what they want. They go throughout town doing a song about charm and doing all kinds of criminal acts. Now, yes, Chalice does accidentally get the Cup brothers arrested, but she does try to wake them and get them away before escaping, so she didn't have to deal with being arrested as well. But the three of them have a very certain camaraderie that we think marks them as a healthy relationship for the most part, and we hope it is explored more. Grabbing the bronze medal of healthiness is the relationship between Cuphead, Mugman, and Elder Kettle. The Cup brothers and the Elder Kettle are family, with Kettle either being their biological grandfather or father, or possibly being an adopted father figure for the boys. The boys seem to have grown up under Elder Kettle's care, and he seems to care about them greatly. They all get along quite well, although Kettle does get quite strict at times, and the boys do like to slack off at times. However, the main reason they fall this low on the list is because of episode 11, Dirt Nap, where Elder Kettle does try to kill Cuphead and Mugman in a variety of ways. Now, he thought this was in self-defense, so we can't get too angry at him here.
Please don't kill me.
Although it's still more toxic than the previous entries because of this. The next relationship we wanted to talk about was Henchman and King Dice. These two don't interact for very long during episode 5, but they are considered co-workers as they both work for the devil. Henchman is a big fan of King Dice and his show Roll the Dice. So much so, he wishes for King Dice's autograph. Sure, he asks at a bad time, and Henchman does end up taking over on Roll the Dice, but the two seem to be on good terms. They aren't necessarily as close as the family from the last entry, but at least they're not trying to actively harm each other, which is nice. Rounding out our healthy section is a very tentatively ranked Cuphead, Mugman, and Porkrind. Now, this relationship is probably the most strained on this list, as they aren't friends and are really closer to something like business partners, as Cuphead and Mugman are just customers at Porkrind's shop. Porkrind as a person is manipulative and kind of a douchebag at times, but he seems to treat his customers like Jerry quite well. He tolerates Cuphead and Mugman for the most part, however, he does imagine killing them when they annoy him. He has the common sense not to send the two of them on a suicide mission even if they do it on their own. Cuphead and Mugman do respect Porkrind quite enough and love his shop, even if they do cause it to get destroyed by accident.
I hate those cups.
With the healthiest relationships out of the way, we now move on to the gray area. The first relationship in the gray area is Doris and Sherman, which, spoiler alert, is the only romantic relationship on this list. Doris and Sherman are minor characters during episode 3 who have been dating or married for quite some time, considering Doris makes mention of their anniversary. Sherman gets quite angry at Doris for mispronouncing anniversary, but doesn't seem abusive and at worst just yells at her.
You missed our anniversary!
Anniversary!
Even after being yelled out, Doris still reveals that Cuphead and Mugman ran away, showing they do care about each other, even if Sherman is too busy with work most of the time. Up next on our list is the group of Duke, Emma, and Jasper. Now, it's unknown exactly what their relationship is, but they are at the very least colleagues or friends who work together in this cemetery to scare people. The three of them are ghosts and generally like each other. However, Duke is immensely abusive towards Jasper, and Emma does very little to stop this, although she is the most peacekeeping of the three of them.
Things just got a lot more interesting.
Duke's abuse of Jasper's stupidity is toxic, but at least the three of them seem to like each other. And maybe Duke is trying to help Jasper in his own toxic, evilish way. In a similar vein is the Root Pack, which is next on our list. This is another group of friends who go around and scam people such as Cuphead and Mugman. The three of them are grifters who take over people's yards to throw parties and have fun at the other person's expense. Now, much like the previous relationship, Sal is pretty abusive towards Ollie, but not because of idiocy, rather for crying. Knowing that Ollie is rather emotional, which leads to a vicious cycle where his bullying leads to Ollie crying, which leads to Sal bullying him, and so on. Now, Chauncey doesn't pretend to be a peacekeeper like Emma and really just lets Sal do whatever he wants, rather than even pretend to care, which shows how toxic she is. Rounding out the gray area of our list is the Devil and Henchman. The Devil employs plenty of demons throughout his time, but one of the biggest employees we see a lot of during the show is Henchman. Henchman is kind of obvious as to his role, where he serves as one of the Devil's high-ranking assistants, helping him with the burns from the sweater or informing him about important events on Inkwell Isle if the Devil doesn't already know. Out of all his employees, the Devil treats Henchman the best, never really being abusive towards him outside of being angry when his song was interrupted by Henchman.
Hey, boss!
What? I was singing!
That's why it ranks in the gray area. He's still treating Henchman badly, and it's not a relationship to aspire to. But between this and the Devil's many other relationships within the show, this is by far his best. And Henchman definitely deserves the Devil's niceties in this show. We now reach the bottom of our spectrum, none other than the many toxic relationships. Starting off our toxic section is the brotherly duo, Ribby and Croaks. Ribby and Croaks are the main antagonists of the self-titled episode during the first half of the season and can be seen as a dark reflection of Cuphead and Mugman. Not only are both pairs of brothers, but they were raised by a single relative, with Ribby and Croaks being raised by their darling mother, who they even sing songs about. The two were pro boxers who often fought with each other but quit thanks to their aforementioned mother. Nowadays, they tend to fight each other anyway, over the pettiest, smallest arguments. And we mean fully physical fights with very little beyond basic insults thrown between the two. They also get so focused on fighting each other that they show very little regard for the environment around them when they do so. It's no surprise the two of them are toxic, but they're still not the most toxic relationship we see in the show. Earning our bronze medal of toxicity is the relationship between the Devil and Stickler. Much like Henchman, Stickler is employed by the Devil, and therefore is at the whims of the Devil throughout the show. However, Stickler only appears in one episode. But in this one episode, we learn everything we need to learn about the relationship between these two characters. Stickler, as his name implies, is a stickler who prefers that work be completed before anyone could relax.
I will not apologize for doing my job.
Which is very annoying to everyone around him, especially when it's said that the Devil rarely gives out vacations or breaks to his workers. The Devil also finds Stickler quite annoying, but for some reason doesn't destroy him in any way, which is probably the nicest thing he's done for the small demon. However, while Stickler doesn't seem to mind the Devil and may even look up to his boss, the Devil finds Stickler annoying beyond belief, going as far as to destroy Hell's records just to make Stickler go away. However, the Devil also somewhat fears that Stickler will find out about his deception, which is interesting as well. When it comes down to it, the Devil hates Stickler, and the only reason they don't rank lower is that Stickler doesn't hate the Devil in return. The silver medal of toxicity very neatly belongs to the Devil and King Dice. The final employee of the devil is his supposed right-hand man, which makes sense as to why it's the second most toxic relationship in the show. King Dice runs a soul-stealing operation disguised as a game show called Roll the Dice, which is supposed to be easy enough for the dumbest people to win and therefore lose their souls to. However, it is quickly revealed that it's too smart for the main character Cuphead, which leads to King Dice having his first loss ever. This understandably makes the devil upset, not just demoting the king to a lower position than henchman, but maybe even killing him based on how he reacted. He was willing to harm Dice beyond belief for his failure, which shows a severe lack of care for his servants, and the only reason he didn't outright slay King Dice is that he was good enough to be the devil's right hand at one point.
You are no longer my number one.
Hopefully we see more of not just this relationship, but King Dice in general, as we've mentioned on this channel 100 or more times at this point. Maybe this will lead to the relationship being less toxic, or possibly even more so. But our most toxic relationship and earning our coveted gold medal of toxicity is the relationship between Cuphead, Mugman, and the devil. Now, this should be a no-brainer as to why, but the simplest explanation is as follows. Cuphead and Mugman are at odds with the devil since the very first episode, and then on and off throughout the rest of the series, they are bitter rivals until episode 9, where the devil makes his final appearance for season 1. They fight with words and trickery throughout the series, and they only have one fleeting moment of friendship while in the line for the roller coaster, but even that started off with false pretenses.
You're not so bad after all.
It's no surprise that this relationship, being as strained and hateful as it is, takes the bottom spot. And it wouldn't surprise us if more of this relationship is explored in season 2 and it somehow gets worse. But at the moment, it unequivocally takes the gold on our list. But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.